No one could handle the billionaire's daughter until a single dad janitor did the impossible. The morning sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the Rosemont International Academy, a school known not just for its elite education, but for its billionaire students who walked the halls like royalty. Among them was her, the daughter of the wealthiest man in the city. Everyone knew her name, but no one dared say it too loud. Teachers feared her temper. Students avoided her glare, and even the principal pretended to smile when she was near. Rumor had it that 10 teachers had already quit because of her attitude. The staff whispered about how cold she was, how she never smiled, and how every attempt to reach her ended in failure, until one Monday morning when a new janitor walked through those same glass doors. He was a quiet man, probably in his late 30s. His hands looked rough, his uniform faded, and his eyes, though tired, had a strange gentleness in them. People didn't pay much attention to him. He was just there to clean floors. But what no one knew was that he wasn't just a janitor. He was a single dad. He had a little girl, about 8 years old, who waited for him every evening at a small apartment downtown. Her drawings covered the fridge, and every night before bed she'd ask, "Did you smile today, Dad?" And every night he'd reply, "I tried my best." The first time the janitor crossed paths with the billionaire's daughter was in the hallway outside the art studio. She was yelling at a staff member, something about a painting not being good enough. When she saw him sweeping nearby, she snapped, "What are you looking at?" He didn't respond, just smiled politely and continued sweeping. No one ever smiled at her without fear. It made her freeze for a second. Then angrily she turned away. The next morning he was cleaning the same hallway again. This time she dropped her coffee cup. Without a word, he bent down, cleaned up the mess, and said softly, "It's okay. Accidents happen." She stared at him, confused. Most people avoided eye contact. He spoke to her like she was human. Not powerful, not intimidating, just human. She walked away, saying nothing. But that night, for the first time in months, she couldn't sleep. Those words, "It's okay. Accidents happen," echoed in her head. Days passed. She started noticing him. How he always greeted everyone, even when no one replied. How he repaired broken lockers when students didn't care. How he carried heavy boxes for teachers who never thanked him. And one afternoon, she saw something that changed everything. He was sitting on a bench behind the school holding a small lunchbox. Inside were 2 sandwiches. Next to him sat a little girl with messy hair and the brightest smile. His daughter. They were laughing so freely that it didn't fit the cold world she lived in. From a distance, the billionaire's daughter watched them. That laughter, that warmth, it felt like something she'd lost a long time ago. A few weeks later, during an art event at the academy, she was presenting her painting, a dark, abstract piece filled with chaos and loneliness. The audience clapped politely, but she looked restless. Then out of nowhere, the janitor's daughter ran up to her. She couldn't have been more than 8. Holding a crumpled paper in her tiny hands, she said, "Your painting is sad. You should add yellow. Yellow makes everything happy." The room went silent. Everyone expected the billionaire's daughter to yell, to scold the child for interrupting. But she didn't. She just stared at that little girl. And for the first time, someone saw tears in her eyes. That night, she repainted everything. She added yellow. From that day on, things began to change. The girl who once yelled now volunteered at school events. The one who avoided people started helping other students. Teachers whispered again, but this time in disbelief. And sometimes, when no one was looking, she would sneak out behind the school, sit beside that same bench, and share her lunch with a janitor and his daughter. No one could explain it. No one knew what he said or did to her. But everyone noticed one thing. The billionaire's daughter had finally learned how to smile again. And it all started with the kindness of a man who swept floors, but understood hearts better than anyone else ever could. Sure, here's the continuation with a kindness, inspiring, and motivational ending that fits naturally with your previous story tone and pacing. Emotional, cinematic, and globally relatable. Months passed, and the changes in her were impossible to ignore. She started coming to school early, sometimes even helping the janitor before classes began. She'd help him arrange chairs, wipe the blackboards, and once even painted a wall that had been dull and cracked for years. The students were stunned. The teachers whispered, "The billionaire's daughter, the same girl who once shouted at everyone, was now quietly doing things no one expected from her." When someone asked her why, she simply said, "Because kindness feels better than control." But the real turning point came one winter morning. The janitor didn't show up for work. For the first time, the halls felt empty, not because of the noise, but because of his absence, his ladder, his gentle greetings, his calm presence. It was all missing. By noon, word spread that he had fallen sick. He was hospitalized, struggling to afford his treatment. The billionaire's daughter didn't hesitate. She went straight to her father's office, a place she used to avoid. For the first time in her life, she didn't ask him for a car, a trip, or money for herself. She asked for help for someone else. Her father was stunned, but he saw something in her eyes. Compassion, the kind he hadn't seen since her mother passed away years ago. That evening, a private ambulance arrived at the small hospital. The janitor's treatment was fully covered anonymously, but he knew he didn't need to ask. Weeks later, he returned to work, weaker, but smiling. And when he did, he found a surprise waiting for him. The hallway he always cleaned had been freshly painted, bright yellow with a sign on the wall that read, "Sometimes the smallest hearts hold the greatest strength." It was her idea, her way of saying thank you, not with words but with meaning. From that day forward, she volunteered at shelters, sponsored school lunches, and quietly helped students who couldn't afford books. Her father watched from a distance, realizing something he'd forgotten long ago. Money can buy luxury, but kindness builds legacy. 2. One afternoon, as the janitor packed up to leave, his little daughter ran ahead to say goodbye. The billionaire's daughter knelt beside her and smiled. "Your dad changed my life," she said softly. The little girl giggled. "He says, kindness is like sunlight. You can't see it, but you can feel it." The billionaire's daughter smiled through her tears and whispered, "Then I hope I can be someone's sunlight." 2. That day, as the sun dipped behind the academy's glass walls, two worlds, one rich, one humble, stood side by side. And in that golden light, it was clear it wasn't wealth, power, or status that changed hearts. It was simple human kindness. A storico egi right to continue, Crow. Years went by, and Rosemont International Academy slowly changed too. The walls once filled with pride and distance now echoed with laughter, teamwork, and compassion. What started with one janitor's quiet smile became a ripple that touched every corner of the school. The billionaire's daughter, no longer feared, no longer distant, had become something even greater than popular. She had become loved. She started a small program called Yellow Days, inspired by the color that once healed her heart. Every Friday, students and staff wore something yellow and did one act of kindness, big or small. Sometimes it was as simple as helping a classmate carry books. Sometimes it was writing letters to hospital patients. But every act mattered, and every time she saw someone smile because of it, she felt that same warmth she'd once seen in the janitor's eyes. One afternoon, during the school's annual assembly, the principal announced something special. The stage curtain lifted, revealing a newly built art room, sunlit, colorful, and full of student paintings. Above the entrance hung a golden plaque, dedicated to the man who taught us that every act of kindness paints the world brighter. The janitor stood at the back of the hall, tears glistening in his eyes. He wasn't used to the spotlight. He had only ever wanted to make the world a little cleaner, a little kinder. But in that moment, surrounded by applause, he realized that his life had done both. After the ceremony, the billionaire's daughter approached him quietly. She was now older, calmer, her eyes carrying a gentleness that mirrored his. "Do you remember the day I yelled at you in the hallway?" she asked with a small, embarrassed smile. He chuckled softly. "I remember," he said. "And I also remember the day you added yellow." They both laughed, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then she handed him a framed painting. It was a simple piece, just a sunrise over the academy painted in soft shades of gold. She said, "You told me accidents happen, but some accidents change lives. Meeting you was one of them." He looked down at the painting, then at her, and said quietly, "Maybe kindness isn't something we teach. Maybe it's something we remind each other of." From that day on, Rosemont wasn't just known for its wealthy students. It became known as the School of Sunlight. Students from different backgrounds began to study there. scholarships funded by the billionaire's daughter herself. And every morning, as sunlight poured through those same tall glass windows, it felt like the school was smiling too. Years later, when the janitor finally retired, his daughter, now grown and working as a teacher, took his place at the academy. On her first day, she found a note taped inside the janitor's closet. It read, "Never underestimate the power of a kind word. Patient heart or a little yellow paint." She smiled, folded the note carefully, and whispered to the empty hallway, "Don't worry. Dad, the sunlight lives on." And in that moment, with dust floating through the golden light, it was clear. Kindness doesn't end with a person. It continues through every heart it touches. The academy had changed over the years, but the heart of it still glowed the same. The once cold hallways now carried laughter, the sound of music classes echoing from rooms where students painted dreams instead of perfection. The sunlight still poured through the tall glass windows every morning, just like it had the day the janitor first walked in years ago. His daughter, now Miss Clara, the new art teacher, stood by those same windows holding a cup of tea. Her reflection showed a gentle smile, one that looked a lot like her father's. She often thought of him when she saw the sunrise, when the yellow light touched the classroom walls just right. One day, during art class, a new student walked in, a boy about 12, neatly dressed but with eyes that seemed to carry the same loneliness the billionaire's daughter once had. He didn't talk much, sat alone, avoided eye contact. The other kids whispered that his family was powerful, that his father owned half the city. Clara didn't care about that. She saw something familiar in his silence. After class, she walked over and placed a blank canvas in front of him. "Do you paint?" she asked gently. He shrugged. "I used to. My mom said it's a waste of time." Clara smiled, her voice calm and kind. "My dad used to say that kindness is like sunlight. It might not change the world in a day, but it changes the way we see it." The boy blinked, confused but curious. "Sunlight?" She nodded. "Try adding a little yellow. Just see what happens." He frowned at first, but then picked up the brush. Slowly, he began to paint. At first, dark colors, gray, black, deep blue. But as the minutes passed, streaks of yellow appeared, small at first, then brighter. When he looked up, he saw her watching with a smile. "That," Clara said softly, "is what hope looks like." Weeks passed. The boy started staying after class, painting, laughing a little more. One afternoon, he brought his father to see his work. The man, sharp suit, cold expression, stopped in front of the canvas. It showed a sunrise over a school courtyard, the same courtyard Clara's father once swept every morning. "What's this?" his father asked. The boy smiled shyly. "It's called the Yellow Morning. Miss Clara helped me paint it." For a moment, the man didn't speak. Then he looked at Clara and said quietly, "Thank you. I'd forgotten what that color looked like." That night, as Clara closed her classroom, she glanced up at the wall where her father's note hung in a small frame. "Never underestimate the power of a kind word. A patient heart or a little yellow paint." She touched the frame gently, whispering, "Your sunlight still spreading. Dad." Outside, the setting sun bathed the academy in golden light. And somewhere beyond those clouds, maybe in heaven, a quiet janitor with tired eyes and a gentle smile was watching. Proud, peaceful, knowing his small kindness had lit up generations. Because kindness never ends. It just keeps finding new hands to hold it, and new hearts to heal.